Welcome to this explainer. Okay, picture this. You walk out to your garden, admire dozens of bright, beautiful yellow tomato flowers, and you're already imagining those baskets full of juicy, homegrown tomatoes. But then, you return a few days later and you find those exact same flowers just scattered on the ground. Yeah. Few things are more frustrating for a dedicated gardener than seeing healthy-looking plants just drop their empty blossoms. Well, let's dive into this because this whole problem is actually highly preventable once we understand exactly what the plant is trying to tell us.
So what is actually going on here? Why are they falling off? This phenomenon is known as blossom drop. You see, tomato flowers naturally contain both male and female reproductive structures, which means they can self-pollinate. But when a flower falls off without producing a tomato, that is the plant's literal way of waving a massive red flag at you. It's signaling that some sort of physiological roadblock is preventing a successful fruit set. Instead of wasting precious energy on a fruit that just isn't going to survive, the plant simply aborts the flower entirely.
And that brings us to one of the absolute most common traps we gardeners fall into. Let's call it the nitrogen trap. It is so easy to assume that more fertilizer automatically equals more tomatoes, right? But the reality is that continuing your early spring feeding schedule into June creates a huge nutrient imbalance. Specifically, excess nitrogen encourages these lush, gorgeous green leaves and incredibly vigorous stems, but it completely starves reproductive fruit development. So your plant might look massive and impressive, but underneath all that lush foliage, it's actively dropping flowers because it is focusing entirely on growing leaves instead of growing tomatoes.
So to fix this, we need a precise roadmap. Today we're going to cover the empty flower problem, early flowering, full bloom, fruit clusters, and finally, holistic management. Part 1. The empty flower problem.
Like we said, successful self-pollination in tomatoes doesn't just happen by magic. It actually depends on multiple environmental and nutritional factors lining up perfectly. Extreme temperatures can completely ruin pollen viability. We just talked about excessive nitrogen, but there are also specific nutrient deficiencies, inconsistent watering routines, and overall poor plant health to worry about. By midsummer, if you're just continuing a standard spring feeding schedule, you are basically guaranteeing that you'll hit at least one of these roadblocks. And that creates the exact nutrient imbalances that cause those beautiful yellow flowers to just detach and hit the dirt.
To solve this, we have to match our inputs to the plant's exact growth stage. Here are the 3 distinct June growth stages we're going to tackle today. Let's move to the first stage and see how this builds a solid foundation for a massive harvest.
Part 2. Early flowering.
All right, so this is the stage you'll commonly see in early June. Your plants are actively producing clusters of flowers, but they haven't actually developed any tiny green fruits just yet. During this specific phase, phosphorus becomes the absolute star of the show. It is the essential nutrient that supports flower development, root strength, and vital energy transfer right inside the plant. If your tomato is deficient here, it simply won't have the efficiency to convert those blooms into fruit. You need to switch to a bloom-supporting balanced fertilizer right now. If your fertilizer label shows a significantly higher first number, which stands for nitrogen, put it away. You want slightly elevated phosphorus to signal to the plant, hey, stop focusing on leaves and start focusing on reproduction.
Now here's something really fascinating. Let's call it the boron factor. Tomatoes only require microscopic amounts of boron. Literally, think of it like a tiny pinch of salt in a huge recipe. But without it, flowers that look perfectly healthy will just fail to develop fruit. It is absolutely vital for pollen viability. But a quick warning here. Because it's needed in such incredibly tiny quantities, over-applying it can actually be toxic to the plant. You have to follow the manufacturer's recommendations exactly. But when done right, even a small, careful correction to a boron deficiency can dramatically improve your fruit set.
Moving on to Part 3. Full bloom.
Once those first flowers successfully set, your plants are going to have multiple flower clusters opening up all over, demanding incredibly targeted support for both their roots and their leaves. As flowering continues, potassium takes over as the heavy lifter. Often called the quality nutrient, potassium is what actually determines if those blossoms successfully turn into tomatoes. It supports plant vigor, disease resistance, and crucial water regulation. June brings intense heat stress, which we know reduces pollen viability, so a steady root feeding program rich in potassium helps the plant tolerate that heat stress while directing its energy precisely where we want it into developing healthy, resilient fruit.
And don't just focus on the soil. Treat your plants to some foliar feeding. This basically involves spraying diluted nutrients directly onto the leaves for rapid absorption. It's kind of like a quick energy shot for your plant. It's a fantastic technique to quickly correct minor micronutrient deficiencies right alongside your root feeding.
And just a quick side note on fertilizer types, both organic and synthetic fertilizers work perfectly for this, as long as you match them to the right stage. Organics release gradually to improve soil structure over time, while synthetics give you rapid, precise control over your nutrient ratios. Pick whatever fits your gardening style, just make sure the nutrients match the bloom stage.
We also absolutely have to talk about calcium, because it is deeply tied to how you water. You might be applying plenty of calcium to prevent weak fruit or blossom end rot, but here's the catch. Calcium relies entirely on water availability to physically move through the plant's tissues. What does that mean? It means fluctuating moisture. Swinging from extremely dry soil to excessively wet soil will cause those flowers to drop regardless of how much fertilizer you apply. Consistent, deep watering and a really good layer of mulch are mandatory here.
Part 4. Fruit clusters. All right, this is the heavy lifting stage. Your plant is performing a massive balancing act right now. It's actively flowering up at the top canopy while simultaneously expanding green tomatoes lower down on the vine. And as you can see here, nutrient demand shifts significantly. The demand for potassium spikes to high to drive fruit size, flavor, and that eventual color development, while nitrogen must drop to low. If you give it excessive nitrogen during this heavy fruiting phase, the plant will get confused and try to push out new leaf growth at the direct expense of the tomatoes you've worked so hard to set.
And since our plants can't literally talk to us, we have to read their leaves to ensure we're meeting these changing demands. Think of this table as your ultimate translation guide. Yellowing lower leaves? Okay, that indicates a nitrogen deficiency. Purple-tinged foliage? That points straight to a phosphorus problem. Marginal leaf scorch or poor fruit quality? Classic potassium deficiency. Learning to read these visual cues lets you make timely corrections before you suffer any real losses to your yield.
Oh, and to keep that foliage working hard for you, supplemental foliar feeding with magnesium is highly effective right now. Magnesium sprays help maintain incredibly healthy leaves. And remember, these leaves are the literal energy factories for your tomatoes. They drive efficient photosynthesis, pumping out all the carbohydrates required to swell and sweeten those growing fruit clusters.
Finally, Part 5. Holistic management.
Because let's be real, while understanding nutrients is vital, fertilizer is ultimately only one piece of the giant puzzle. It has to be paired with careful, holistic garden observation. Let's rapidly break down some crucial environmental factors. Timing matters. Never apply fertilizer during extreme midday heat. Feed early in the morning or late evening to avoid stressing the plant. For pollination, try giving your flower clusters a gentle little shake in the morning to release the pollen, especially on days when there's no wind. If you are growing in containers, remember that nutrients leach out fast, so they require weekly diluted feeding unlike your in-ground beds. And finally, adding compost maximizes soil microbial activity, which organically enhances how well all these nutrients are released to the roots.
And here's a crucial point. You've got to know exactly what kind of tomato you are actually growing. Indeterminate varieties will just keep growing taller and producing flowers all season long, which means they require ongoing, continuous nutrient support. Determinate varieties, on the other hand, grow to a fixed size and concentrate all of their fruit production into a much shorter window. That creates a very intense, short-term nutrient demand. Knowing which one is currently sitting in your garden will dramatically refine how and when you apply your feeding strategy.
Listen, if you have struggled with blossom drop before, do not assume it's permanent. Just imagine walking out to your garden a few weeks from now and seeing massive clusters of healthy green tomatoes exactly where empty flowers once fell. Picture branches literally bending under the weight of ripening fruit. That outcome is entirely achievable. The difference between a disappointing harvest and an exceptional one usually just comes down to small, precise improvements in nutrition and watering based on the exact growth stages we've covered today. So, I'm leaving you with this. Will you adjust your June fertilization roadmap today to stop those empty flowers? By shifting your focus to phosphorus during flowering, prioritizing potassium for fruit set, maintaining that crucial moisture, and cutting back on the excess nitrogen, you can completely transform your harvest. Get out into the garden, observe your plants, apply this balanced approach, and get ready for an absolutely incredible season of homegrown tomatoes.